First of all, let me welcome you all to Year 11 IB. It should be a very exciting course with a lot of interesting texts, but obviously a great deal of hard work. So prepare yourselves for a journey and try to use these 3 weeks to really get started before you launch into this course. I want to start by giving you a bit of an outline of the course that you will be facing for the next 2 years. As you know, the IB course starts from day 1 of Year 11, or really it starts from now in terms of context. So it is, unlike the HSC course, you will be assessed on content all the way through. So it is vital that you, from today, focus fully until the end exams in Year 12. The first thing I want to talk about is the text lists and the assessment tasks that are before you. On the left here, you can see a list of the text that you will be studying over the next 2 years. There might be some slight modifications, but this is the list that we're currently doing with the students going into Year 12 currently. As you can see, the texts are divided into 4 different groups. We'll come back to assessments in a second. And that's a grouping done by the IB. So part 1 is a group of works in translation, i.e. then all written in a language other than English originally. So we got Woman 2.0, a novel written in Arabic, Blood Wedding, a play written in Spanish, and Patron Siskin's novel Perfume, which was originally written in German but set in Paris, or in France at least. In part 2, we do a detailed study of 3 English texts, all written in Great Britain some time ago. First one is William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. We then do a selection of 15 poems by John Keats, and finally we do the essays of George Orwell. In part 3, we study the genre of poetry, and in our case, we study 4 poets. We study the Australian poet Gwen Harwood, contemporary sort of. She wrote from the poets we study are from the 1950s up to the late 1980s. John Donne from England, and Emily Dickinson from America, and finally Seamus Heaney from Ireland, who sadly died about 3 weeks ago. That's a bit more. It's about 5 weeks ago now. And lastly, in Group 4, we do Chinua Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart, which is set in Africa, in Nigeria. Sophocles' drama Antigone from ancient Greece. And finally, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, which is written and set in Kerala in India. So those are the texts that we will study. However, that's not the order that we will study them in. So we will not study the groups 1, 2, 3, and 4, the parts 1, 2, 3, 4, but rather try to base that on assessment and kind of allow your skills to mature into the right parts of the course. So, in fact, we will start with Group 4 down here. So we'll start with Things Fall Apart, Antigone, and God of Small Things at the start of next year. The reason for that is they are all assessed in the prepared oral presentation, which is, in a sense, maybe the most straightforward of the assessment tasks in the IB, in that you simply, it's a 15-minute speech, but it's a prepared 15-minute speech, so you've got plenty of time to, essentially you'll have 6 months to write your speech, rehearse your speech, perfect your speech, and you're allowed to have notes, and you can go in and just do a brilliant delivery of a well-prepared speech. So it's less stressful than any of the other tasks. So we will commence the course with the study of those 3 texts in Term 1 and halfway through Term 2 next year. And once you find the text or the 2 texts that you want to work with for your oral, you can commence preparing that oral fairly early on. But essentially the aim is that you will have the entire speech written, edited and perfect by the end of Term 3, and then we do the actual oral presentations in the exam period, which is normally about the 2nd week of Term 4. So that's your first sort of collection of real marks going towards the IB assessments. The second group we do is Part 1, and that's the works in translation. So in our case, Woman 2.0, Blood Wedding, and Perfume. They will be used for your literature in translation essay, which again we will start working on fairly early. So we'll do those works in essentially second half of Term 2 and Term 3 of next year. And by the end of that, you will have chosen one of them that you will use for your essay, and you'll have all of term 4, the summer holidays, to write that essay. It's only a 1,500 word essay, so it's not very long, but obviously has to be quite perfect when you write it over 2 terms, analyzing an issue that you select from one of those 3 texts. And this is not a comparative study, so it's just one of those texts straight off. And that essay is handed in first draft when you first come back from the summer holidays into year 12, and then you'll get some feedback back from your teacher, and you'll hand in the final copy in term 2 of year 12. Next we move on to part 2, which the assessment for part 2 tends to be the one that's the most stressful in the IB, and then it's the one we practice the most for. We will start doing commentary practice already this week to prepare you for essentially the 2 components that the commentary writing, which is first the oral commentary for part 2, and then you will do written commentary for paper 1 in your final exam in November 2015. But commentary practice is definitely the most useful skill that you will learn in the IB. So try to really gain an edge on this and really try to start learning the basics of commentary writing already during these 2 practice weeks. But the oral commentary essentially is you will get a passage from you'll get an extract of 20 to 30 lines from one of Keats' poems. We'll lock you in a room with that passage for 20 minutes, where you get to annotate it and think about what that means, and then you will come in to your teacher and deliver a 10-minute speech on that particular poem, and how stylistically it's built up, and how that's important in the opus of Keats' collected works. Following that, if you're doing high level, so that applies to high level. If following that, we will then say stop after 10 minutes and say that's concluding the work that we've done with Keats, and now we're going to have a loose conversation about either Shakespeare's Hamlet for 10 minutes or about George Orwell's essays for 10 minutes, and then we'll ask general questions about who the central character is and why we think they're important, and maybe some what creates the core tension in the play, or theatrically why is it an effective play, etc., etc. So we can talk about that for about 10 minutes, or exactly 10 minutes, and that concludes the oral commentary assessment. Once we reach that stage, which is about 2 weeks into term 2 of year 12, we can pretty much ignore everything that's behind us. We've completed group 1, we've completed group 2, we've completed group 4. So now we can purely focus on the genre of poetry and the study of the 4 poets in preparation for the paper 2 in the final exam, which is a genre question. So you'll get 3 questions on poetry, you'll pick one of them, and you'll work with that question in relation to 2 to 3 of the 60 poems that you've studied, right? So out of the 60 poems you've studied, you pick 2 to 3 that you will use for that final examination, paper 2. Okay? So, yes, that in essence is how the program is constructed for you. One thing to bear in mind is that the IB is a very challenging course. You study a lot of texts, and you need to be really quite strong in literary analysis and sort of reading and working independently with your text. So 70% is quite a good sort of benchmark in terms of when you go into the IB. That's kind of, if you had a mark of 70 or above in year 10, you'd be quite comfortable, I think, in completing the work of the IB. But we're not saying to anyone who's got 69% or below that you cannot do it, but you really need to consider why you have such a low mark in year 10, because the English demands will definitely increase in terms of complexity and workload when you get into year 11 IB. If, however, you are feeling that, yes, the independence, the freedom to study text on my own, not having to force them through a certain lens, or the fact that I can work really closely with the text and really work with literary techniques and analysis is something that really appeals to me, then you probably can still do very well. But you will need to start working really hard from this point and use each assessment and each class task that you do, maybe even these, in fact, you should use these 3 weeks that are coming up to gauge whether this is the course for you. Because it's easy to make the transition across, obviously, to the HSC course if you decide at this stage that probably this is a bit too difficult for you and you need a bit more structure, for instance. So let's move on now to the content of what you're going to be doing for the next 3 weeks, which is doing the prelude to the study of Sophocles' play Antigone. In order to work with Antigone, you need to understand its context, which is that it's the third part in the trilogy about the family of Oedipus. And so in order to kind of understand the tension in the family and the tension between the uncle and Antigone, the niece, you need to understand what's gone on in the play Oedipus Rex and also in Oedipus at Colonus. So, for that reason, the focus for our 3 weeks is going to be the play Oedipus Rex. You'll be reading that and exploring passages from it and discussing and trying to represent that play in various ways, just to feel that you're comfortable with sort of the prelude of Antigone. We'll also explore the literary devices used in Antigone, so that you know what to expect when we go in there. So the first thing you should now do after concluding this film is to go back to your Schoology course and watch the other film, which is kind of Introduction to Greek Drama, which will give you a bit of a background. And then there's a worksheet for you with that explores dramatic devices and techniques that you can expect and search for in the play. And then as a group, try to gather around at least 4, so there'll be at least 3 other IB students, so that's a group of 4 of you at the least, and read the play together. You can borrow the play from your English teacher. They'll be happy to provide it for you. If you prefer to read the play on your own, that's an option for you as well. Obviously, it is drama. It's meant to be performed, but not performed in the way that we expect it today. Really, it was just a chorus and 1 or 2 actors, in the case of Antigone, actually 3 actors, reading against the chorus. So ideally, 4 people is a suitable cast for this play, if you want to read it in class. But if you prefer to read it on your own, that is totally fine as well. So, I hope you have an enjoyable 3 weeks and that you use this time to the max to really prepare yourselves for what's going to be a challenging 2 years, but hopefully a very enjoyable experience as well.